Welcome To Know the Love of Christ.
Welcome back. If you were with us last episode, you know that we covered Mark 7, verses 24 through 37, and there we found the account of the Syrophoenician woman's faith, where she begged Jesus to heal her, well, not heal, but cast out a demon from her daughter. And we also went over the account where Jesus healed a deaf man. And we talked about overcoming obstacles like being grossed out by spit, and how, having even the smallest faith in Jesus and knowing that you only need a portion of his power, Jesus commends that. But we also discussed how Jesus draws the faith out of people and how he often did that in his earthly ministry. As we continue today, we'll be going through chapter 8, verses 1 through 26, and Dee will be leading us. So if you will, go ahead and pause here, read those verses, and then press play and join us as we begin.
Great. Thanks, Stephanie. So verse 1 starts off, in those days. So we left off last episode where he was in Decapolis. In my little geeky moment, we discussed where he was. So he's still in the Decapolis region. Now, I mentioned last episode how those were the same people that told Jesus to leave, begged him to leave because he healed the man with legion. But here, multitude being very great and having nothing to eat, Jesus called the disciples to him and said to them, Brittany, you're going to like this. I have compassion on the multitude because they have now been with me 3 days and have nothing to eat. So now the people, instead of saying, please leave, they're following him around. And you mentioned how it was an area of 10 cities. So they're following him around 3 days now. And he does what he did back in chapter 6 with feeding this multitude. We learned that it's going to be 4,000 people versus what he fed before in 5,000 people. So I found similarities and differences in both those events. Here, he has compassion, just like he did with the 5,000 people. But now they're staying with him for 3 days. With the 5,000, they swarmed him right off the boat, if you remember. So these people now, they're not leaving, and there's no food. And I noticed with the 4,000, Jesus goes to his disciples with the problem. Before, they came to him and said, hey, we have no food. Can you send them away? Mm-hmm. But Jesus is going to them now. I'm sure they had some food, but at this point, Jesus is noticing they're probably hungry.
Well, they've probably run out if they've been with
right.
him. They had some at the beginning, most likely, but
they're asking him to heal, that he's teaching. Why didn't they ask for food? I wonder.
I know. And we know there had to be something magnetic, personality-wise, about Jesus that drew people to him. We know he's the Son of God. But also, I don't know if you're going to bring up this, but it said before that in the other account in 6 that they had no leisure even to eat. And I was thinking, they had to be hungry too after 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
They're starving, and I was just thinking, Jesus relates to us. I'm sure he was hungry too. And he's thinking, if I'm hungry, they're hungry.
They're hungry.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. You know how when you're recently we've done a lot of traveling, right? And I know Hiram doesn't really like to stop. He likes to continue to drive, and he'd rather not be bothered. But sometimes I will kind of be like, hey, I'll ask the kids hey, y'all hungry? And they'll be like, yeah. And it's I'm hungry too, but I'm kind of going to put it on the kids. It's Hiram, we should stop because the kids are hungry. And I'm going to get me something to eat too since we're stopping. We might as well, And it's not that Jesus has to beat around the bush like I do with Hiram on a car ride, but, it's kind of one of those things where, like Stephanie said, Jesus has been working. He's been healing. It's not he's been teaching. It's not like he's just been sitting there chilling. He's been busy. Why didn't they ask for food? And I kind of think it's one of those situations where you approach Jesus and it's kind of I know he could probably feed me, but I don't really want to ask him for food. That seems like such a small thing. I really need to be healed. I want to ask him for the big stuff, you know? And how often do we approach God like that in our prayers? Like, no, realize you need help in every aspect of your life. And God says, whatever you ask of me, I will give it to you. Like, just ask, you know? So, yeah.
Right. And I mean, we're told to cast all our cares on him, not just the big ones.
Yeah.
Right.
And we talked about that once before. How we tend to go to him with the big things, like, oh, I can take care of the little things myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just thought of that because that's in 1 Peter 5:7. And then right after that is 1 Peter 5:8, where he says, you know, your adversary, the devil, is walking around.
Seeking whom he may devour.
Yeah. And a lot of times I'm sure in those moments of temptation, we're thinking, this isn't anything big. Anyway, sorry.
Oh, that's a
Side
good
note.
point. So in verse 4, like they ask, you know, his disciples ask him after he presents them with the problem, how can one satisfy these people with bread here in the wilderness? You know, they're asking how. So it's been, you know, 2 short months, we said, because of the distance that they walked. We think 2 months approximately. Possibly, yeah. Since the feeding of the 5,000. I thought this shows the fragility of humans. We know the importance of developing our relationship with God, studying, praying, and worshiping. And here are his 12 apostles who've been with him every single day, not even bringing up the feeding of the 5,000.
Right. And like how, I don't know, I don't want to say dense, but like how much more obtuse can you get? Like, you literally just had this happen, the same situation. And maybe it is like we were talking about with the first one, and Brittany already brought it up. Like, I don't want to just assume that Jesus can do it because he's already done it, or that he wants to even, you know.
Or it was such a humbling moment, a learning experience that
maybe they didn't want to have to do it again.
We're not going to bring this up. You know? But he brings it up. In other words, hey, remember, understand, you know.
Right. And you get down to the end of the passage down in, what is it, 19 or 18? And he brings it up like, guys.
Yeah.
Look at these last 2 things that but these 2 things that I did. Come on, do you not understand yet?
Mm-hmm.
But
it's like when he, in verse 5, when he says, how many loaves do you have? I mean, did this not trigger a memory from last time? Or were they still kind of like, you know, I'm not going to say anything. You can do it. But the contrast, too, also, I mean, if you look in verse 6, now he commands them to sit down on the ground. Before it was like this green grass. It seems so new and pretty, and this is like almost harsh. It's on the ground. So verses 7 through 10, the similarity is they ate, were filled, they had an abundance of leftovers, and he sends the 4,000 away, gets in a boat, and leaves, just like with the 5,000.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll have you know, I don't know where Dalmanutha is. I looked on the map, didn't see it, so I just know it was in the area. I know, I was so disappointed. All right, so 11 through 21. The parallel to this is in Matthew 16. In Matthew's account of this interaction with the Pharisees gives a little more details. He mentions Sadducees. Sadducees did not believe in the resurrection. Mm-hmm. So Jesus tacks it on in Matthew's account about the resurrection. He says, except the sign of the prophet Jonah. So Mark, if you remember, he's writing to a Roman audience. So therefore, the prophet Jonah would be insignificant to these people. And so that's why he doesn't, well, I'm assuming that's why he doesn't mention it here. The Sadducees were a sect of the Jewish rulers who didn't believe in the resurrection. Now, for those of you that don't know, Jonah was a prophet in the Old Testament. He's kind of one of the popular ones because he gets swallowed by a great fish. And he's in the belly of the fish for 3 days, then was released, and he preached repentance to the city of Nineveh as God had commanded him to do in the first place. So both Matthew's account and Mark's account, both of these accounts show that the Jewish leaders now wanted a sign from heaven, because if you notice, they say in verse 11 of Mark, and the Pharisees came out and began to dispute with him, seeking from him a sign from heaven, testing him. So back in, I think it was chapter 3, verses 20 through 30, they accused Jesus of performing miracles by the power of Beelzebub, or Satan. Mm-hmm. So they denied his deity then. So now they want Jesus to prove his deity by giving him a sign from heaven.
Every time it gets me, the Pharisees and the gall, it just says they came up and began to argue with him.
Yeah.
Like,
that's all they wanted to do.
Debating, disputing, quibbling, those are all synonyms there. Like, really? Really? But I don't, it just shows you, no matter how obtuse the disciples were, the Pharisees were far off in left field. I think the disciples were at least on the field, and the Pharisees were like way off base. And I found it interesting. I was trying to look up the word there for sighed deeply in verse 12. It says he sighed deeply in his spirit. And I just, I know as a parent, I sigh deeply. Sometimes, like, the kids will come to me with something, I'm like, like, really, guys? Let's just calm down, or why are you bothering me? Like, I love my children dearly, I do. But when they are coming and arguing or they're testing my patience, I do sigh deeply. But I thought it was interesting because when you go to the account that we studied on the last episode of him healing the deaf man, it said that he sighed. In verse 34 of chapter 7, and looking up to heaven, he sighed and said to him. And I just wonder, because that's the same root word there, or, base word, however you want to put it. And so I'm wondering how he sighed in the last account that we looked at, and why. Like, here he's vexed with him, he's irritated. On, but he wasn't like that with the deaf man. So I wondered, why he sighed. Why is that there?
Maybe when he pulled him off to the side, it was kind of like okay.
Yeah, maybe he's tired.
Maybe.
Because, we know from the Syrophoenician woman, it said he was trying to hide.
Mm-hmm.
But then he returned, he left there. So I don't know. I don't know. That's me partially geeking out, wanting to know all the things.
Brittany, you got anything to add?
Yeah, in 11 through 13, I know we were speaking about the sigh, and of course, here's me using my imagination again. So I guess I geek out with my imagination. But, you could just see, Jesus is fed up. He is just, they came, the Pharisees came, and it's just they're not just approaching him. They start arguing with him. And, they're demanding a sign and different things. And when you read verses 12 through 13, when I read it, it's it's almost as if you hear Jesus. And it's why does this generation seek a sign? And I just picture him truly I say to you, no sign will be given to this generation. And he just turns off and leaves. Mic drop, I'm off. I'm through with y'all.
Exactly.
It's just, he's just fed up. And I like to see that because, again, it's that human side of Jesus. And to know that, okay, it's okay to get frustrated with people. You try to teach people, you try to help people understand. People want you to teach them, and you do all that you can to try and prove who you are. And even Jesus, he's doing miracles. I'm healing people. Y'all say that I'm casting out demons by the power of Satan. Well, that just doesn't make any sense, because if I cast out demons by Satan, and if I'm from Satan, then how is our house going to stand? That makes no sense whatsoever. I'm feeding people. I'm doing all these positive things, and it's just you don't want to see because your eyes aren't open. And it's just I'm just fed up with y'all and your foolishness. I'm done. You know what? You're not going to get a sign in this generation, and peace. I'm out. I don't really know if that's how Jesus responded, but that's how I see it in my head, because I feel that would be me, Mm-hmm. And we're moms, we all have kids, and you think about when your kids are small. And right now Nadia, she's 9, and we're going through this phase now where she's always been very talkative and asked millions and thousands of questions. But like now they're getting to the point, it's a little ridiculous. This is a little off topic, but the other day we were watching Raya and the Last Dragon, and the girl is like, why would they believe in dragons? Don't they know dragons aren't real? Were dragons in the Bible? And I'm like, it's a movie. Just enjoy the movie. Like, oh, stop asking questions and enjoy the movie, you know? And on a different level, but with Jesus, it's like, don't you see what I'm doing? Can't you see what's happening here? Like, just take it for what it is. Like, you're making me upset, you know? Like, you just get frustrated. And so, yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the couple times you've, expressed that you're kind of groaning. I forgot to mention that word side also could be groaned.
Mm-hmm.
And I can imagine him groan. I know I groan with my kids. There's like a sound I make when I'm really irritated. I make it every time. I hate that I do it, but I do it. And I'm just like, like, why are you doing this? I get so frustrated. But I like seeing Jesus' humanity too, for sure.
All right, so 13 through 21. And he left them, and getting into the boat again, departed to the other side. In this boat is he and his disciples. You can see that he's still thinking about his conversation with the Pharisees. Because he in his train of thought, it appears that he just blurts this out. I mean, they may have been discussing that they don't have bread, but it seems as though he, in his train of thought has blurted this out. He says, "Take heed, beware the leaven of the Pharisees and the leaven of Herod." Can you just see the disciples' face? Like, what? Yeah. Okay, we don't have bread, so we gotta wash. Yeah. And obviously he sees their confusion because he says in 17, "Why do you reason because you have no bread? Do you not yet perceive nor understand? Is your heart still hardened?" It's like, ow.
Yeah.
Ow. He's declaring they don't have faith still, even though they saw what they saw. So, and again, it tells me the importance of remembering and understanding, and they didn't still.
Right.
Yeah.
And
he's not sighing in this particular passage. At least the passage doesn't specifically tell us that. But once again, like I read it and I just see the father mentality and the children mentality. And, it's just like, I'm trying to teach y'all an important lesson and y'all worried about your fish sandwiches. To me, it just sounds like it's just more frustration with Jesus because you guys are with me, Like, I know the Pharisees are against me. I know what they're trying to do. You guys are with me every step of the way. You see what I'm doing and you still don't understand.
I think about, it makes me think about when you're in grade school and you have those reading comprehension tests. And, like, there's nothing like being nervous when you read a passage and it starts asking you the main point and there's a bunch of options and you're like, I don't see it in here.
Yeah.
And you're like, what did I get out of this? Like, obviously not what was intended. But, I mean, can you imagine, like, he was literally the most misunderstood person to ever live. And to be misunderstood by those closest to you, no matter what you say. And, I mean, he knew that he would be misunderstood before he came. And he knew that part of that was, like, it had to be that way. Because if they'd understood, I honestly don't think they would have let him go to the cross.
True.
If they had truly understood what was going to happen. Especially Peter. But, here, he's like, beware the leaven of the Pharisees and the leaven of Herod. He's not even talking about bread. He's talking about leaven. And, I mean, I wonder, because did they not see how the Pharisees were, his disciples? Like, did they not? I mean, Jesus uses harsh words with them, and I'm wondering, just in the back of my mind, like, how did the disciples respond to that? Like, I think of them as being defensive, like, man, these guys are picking on Jesus. But, I mean, these are the religious leaders of the day, and these would have been common people. We know these are common people that he picked. And so I'm wondering if they're sitting there, like, just watching it like a volleyball back and forth. Like, whoa, what's going on? Who's right here? Which they know Jesus is right, but for him to warn them of the leaven of Pharisees shows me that they would have been tempted by that. But also the leaven of Herod. I'm wondering what the leaven of Herod is here, other than just like plain worldliness.
I
And then
think
maybe their ideal that he is going to be an earthly king because Herod was power hungry.
right. Yeah, maybe. Or I want to say a long time ago I read where the Sadducees had something to do with the Herodians.
Maybe.
So maybe he
That's
was just
possible. So
putting
maybe
them
it was kind of the
grouping
the
them.
Pharisees and Sadducees. That would be possible.
Maybe. I don't know.
I was just
Interesting.
intrigued by that.
I like how you said that, they would have been tempted by that. Because I was thinking too, they've grown up, they've always known their doctrine, the
Right.
Pharisees' doctrine. And so here they are on attacking who they believe to be the Savior, doing all these miracles, but they're still hardened in heart. So were they like, ooh, maybe the Pharisees are right? Or maybe they're starting to question, because Jesus knows the heart. So maybe that's why he said, beware of the leaven of them. Interesting. I never thought of that. So now we're coming into the healing of the blind man in Bethsaida, verses 22 through 26. This is another miracle that is only recorded in Mark, just like the deaf man. And now he's in Bethsaida. This is where he fed the 5,000, if you remember. I looked on the map. So in verse 23, I noticed that he took the man one-on-one, just like he did with the deaf man. And again, he uses spit. But I notice his humanity here. He took him by the hand. So of course he's blind, so he's leading him. Can you maybe see Jesus saying, hey, watch your step right here. Hey, turn here. Follow me. I got you.
Compassion.
Yeah. In verse 25, he put his hands on his eyes again and made him look up. And he was restored and saw everyone clearly. So in 2 times, he puts his hand on his eyes and makes him look up. And he's drawing out this man's faith, I believe. And that he does this once, but the man doesn't quite see everything yet. He sees something. And what I found interesting was this man, he must have been able to see before, because he says men looking like trees.
Right. So he hadn't been blind from birth, most likely.
Maybe not. I mean, I guess
unless someone had verbally described to him, this is what trees look like.
Felt it, maybe, possibly. But I just found that interesting. He describes it that way. In the whole spit thing, that's another salve. But with that said, Revelation 3:18, when Jesus has a letter written to the lukewarm church, in Revelation 3:18, it says, he's writing to the Laodiceans. It says, I counsel you to buy from me gold refined in fire, that you may be rich, and white garments, that you may be clothed, and that the shame of your nakedness may not be revealed. And anoint your eyes with eye salve, that you may see. And like you said in the last episode, spit was a common thing to be used for healings. It's interesting that it was to the lukewarm church that he wrote this to. I'm wondering if that was some sort of connection. Maybe this man's faith was lukewarm. That's why he didn't see it clearly at first when he was healed. But then the second time he did.
I don't know. I know I've heard it before, but that Jesus proved that he was in control of the whole process here. It's not just, it's done. Like, Jesus can stop or start the healing at any point. He's in complete control and has all authority and power. So, does that make sense? Like the way that he did it this time, that's the way that I've always heard it.
Yeah.
You mean as far as how he healed them?
As far as how he healed him here, where he started and he said, do you see anything? And then Jesus laid his hands on his eyes again. and he opened his eyes and his sight was restored. Because we know Jesus' power is not limited, not
Right.
even by
Yeah.
someone's faith. But I mean, he may have chosen to give him a taste of it. But I know I've heard it in at least 2 or 3 different sermons where people have brought that up, where it's Jesus showing his power here, his complete and total control of every single step of the process, not just. I don't know what I'm trying to say there when I keep saying not just, but I mean.
I've never heard that, but that is interesting to think about, because every time we read about Jesus doing a miracle and he's healing somebody, they're healed completely. He never has to do any more. You know what I mean? So the fact that he spit on his eyes and then laid his hands on him, and, you know, God asked him, or Jesus asked him, does he see anything? And the man says, I can see a little, but it's a little blurry. It looks like trees. And then, you know, Jesus puts his hand on them again. That is interesting to see. I don't know if there's any other miracle recorded like that where Jesus did, you know,
Where
did
he
something.
broke it down into pieces.
Yeah, and maybe the miracle wasn't fully complete, and so now he's got to go back and add more to it. That is an interesting thought. I've never thought of that.
All right, good point. So now it brings us to where we find the love of Christ. Stephanie?
So I see it there in the little section 11 through 13 where Jesus is dealing with the Pharisees. And I guess you could add by extension 14 through 21 as well. Just Jesus's compassion while experiencing his humanity. Like how frustrating it would be to live day in and day out and be so misunderstood and have people coming at you all the time and knowing that everyone that approaches you, like, even if they love you, there's some kind of benefit they get. I talk about, like, with parenting, sometimes it's hard. You feel all touched out and you feel all mommed out. Like, I've given my all. And you know Jesus gave his all 100% of the time, every single day. And just the fact that he did that because he loved us and he wanted us to be with him in eternity, that he dealt with that on a daily basis. You know, I get a break. I don't know that Jesus ever, even when he went to the mountain, you know, and prayed, all of his breaks were extremely short.
Yeah.
At least it seems. So that's where I see it.
Brittany?
Yeah, I see it in the in verses 14 through 21, you know, and then slightly before that, you know, you can tell that Jesus is very aggravated. He's very frustrated. You know, he's got these men with him. He's trying to teach them. He's trying to understand, but these men seem to not completely and fully understand. But, you know, I think about, once again, Jesus's compassion, like Stephanie was talking about, and I just think about how, you know, sometimes if I'm trying to tell somebody something, or I'm trying to teach somebody, or somebody will ask me for advice, and I say, okay, listen, this is what I've done, this is what works for me, and then you go back to them and you're like, hey, how is it going? Did you heed what I said? And they're like, no, I'm still struggling. It's just like, well, why even bother asking me? You know, I just get frustrated. And at that point, I just kind of like, okay, I'm dusting my hands. I'm through of this situation, because you're clearly not listening. But you never see that attitude with Jesus. It's like, even though he may want to dust his hands and be done, he isn't, because Jesus realizes that what he has is far more precious than anything that these people will ever receive, and he's doing everything in his power to make sure that that they understand, even in the midst of his frustration. And it just reminds me of how long suffering he really is. Like, you know, I could be through with you, Brittany. Like, you get on my nerves quite often, and I know I get on people's nerves. I know I do. I'm a handful sometimes, but you know, still, when Jesus is looking at me and he's like, Brittany, you don't get it. You've been a Christian for X amount of years. You still don't understand. Why do you not know this? It's like, it's all right. I love you. I'm going to be long suffering. I'm going to be patient with you. And, you know, I'm just going to continue to walk with you until you get it right. And so that's what I see, you know, here with Jesus. Like, these men don't get it, but I love them and I want them to get it. So we're going to work through this, and I'm going to teach them everything that they need to know, and show them what needs to be seen.
Yeah, I kind of see it in the same areas. You know, he patiently fed the 4,000. He watched his disciples do the same thing as they did when feeding the 5,000. And he patiently waited until they were on the boat for him to teach and to rebuke them. lovingly. He taught the importance of remembering what he does and, why he does it. And it's just his humanity. He can empathize, sympathize with us. So I see it in his patience, his constant patience, his long suffering, like Brittany said. All right. Well, great. Thank you again for joining us today. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to contact us. We would love to study with you or connect you to someone local. As always, we hope you will seek to know the love. You can reach out to us on Facebook or Instagram. We would love to hear from you. And be sure to click like and share this episode with family and friends. In doing so, you're sharing the love of Christ.